I'm Guy.
And I'm Hattie.
And you're watching Midwinter Minis, and about 150,000 of you watched our last Titanic Unclean One video. You know what we're doing, and if you don't, just go watch that video first.
So, let's just carry on, shall we? We left off with a giant amorphous blob of a model, mostly made of polystyrene, expanding foam, cocktail sticks, and a dream. A dream of making a Titan-sized Great Unclean One, the biggest Nurgle Daemon the world of Warhammer has ever seen.
The problem was, though, he was just too damn chunky. Aside from looking like a giant meringue from your worst nightmares, the expanding foam was quite hard to control, and although it's dried with a nice hard shell, it's blown out way too far beyond the edges of the base, and will be quite hard to shape just with additive sculpting alone, so we're going to need to cut this thing back to get a bit more in line with our concept art. Now, when we were building the structure, we used a hot wire cutter to shape the polystyrene chunks, but loads of people in the comments from the last video warned us not to do the same thing with the expanding foam and to cut it with a knife instead. But like all stubborn, lazy creative types, we had to experience it ourselves to believe it. And oh boy, was every single damn person correct. Even with masks on and windows open, I think we both just took about 1 month off our life expectancies just with this one cut. So yeah, a knife it is. Yeah, wow, it's way easier to carve this way. So the plan is to slice away sections that were just too lumpy, overhanging, or obscuring detail. The thing is though, we don't want to plane down all of this, because that expanding foam has set with an amazing lumpy organic texture that will be perfect as exposed gelatinous, oozy gut bits if we leave them as is.
Ooh, I'm going to keep hold of some of these. The shapes look pretty useful. Also, we're cutting away the bottom here to add some shape back and reveal the base surface so we can add some texture and fun elements later on.
And I just want to check there's plenty of space for the sword to stand in front of the belly without his chunkiness getting in the way, and nah, it needs a bit more chopping.
I wanted in on some of that chunk chopping action, and after getting so many compliments on my unclean Oogie Boogie's generous cake, I thought I should take charge of shaping this Titanic Stinky Boy's big booty. Michelangelo, eat your heart out.
Now, the expanding foam kinda swamped all the bits we wanted to look like withered, nasty legs, so we carved some shape back into them. Yeah, that'll do for now. Let's grab these really gnarly looking clean cuts of blobby foam that we can maybe use for texture or terrain later on, and just do some quick tidying up before the next step. And that step is to start bulking up elements like the arms and legs using some kitchen foil.
Also, out of all the designs we let people choose from, our Patreon supporters loved the gross one that had a skyscraper-sized tongue flopping out of its giant head, so we also need to build that up too. Sheets of foil, wrapped, scrunched, shaped and layered up. Always checking how it would fit against the body and flop across the floor, and yeah, it looks good. To attach it, we'll use two methods. First, the same industrial tube glue.
Also, big thanks to the people that suggested making a bigger hole in the nozzle in the previous video. It comes out way easier now.
Once the tongue was in place, we barbed some cocktail sticks through it into the foamy body. Lots of different sticks from lots of different angles should keep it relatively secure until we start sculpting on top.
Now, time to bulk up the arms and get the shape roughly right. Same method really, just tearing off sheets of aluminium foil and wrapping and scrunching them around the wire armatures to build up more realistic limbs. Bonus points for the arm Hattie did, looking like a really good juicy chicken thigh. To make the withered legs, I wrapped up a piece of broken polystyrene foam with some foil just to make sure it was a bit more rigid and kept its shape, and then we experimented with a few different placements until we got one we were both happy with. Same deal, glue, cocktail sticks to pin it in place, and then some more foil to pad out the shape. And now let's start covering this rough foil texture and the carved foam with some papier-mâché. And yes, I say papier-mâché. If you're going to use a French phrase, just go all out. Don't half-ass it and call it paper-mâché. You might as well just call it mashed paper. The first step is just going to be laying down some sheets of paper soaked in a mix of PVA, filler and water to make a kind of crust to start working up from, and sort of sketch on where we want to add flesh and where we want to leave the bulgy expanding foam understructure visible. My mum visited me and the kids recently and brought this feature from the Jersey Evening Post about the local wargamers, the Jersey Privateers Gaming Club. I gave the article a good read, but I thought it would be pretty cool to have some of my fellow nerds from my home island be integrated into this crazy Warhammer monstrosity too, so they got ripped up, soaked and laid into place. We used some big soft brushes to push the paper down onto the form of the body, which softened the shapes a bit.
This should also help places that were really slippery, like the plastic Easter eggs used for the head shapes, to accept more sculpting materials later. After laying that down, it was the end of the workday, and so the Titanic Unclean One got left overnight to firm up. And in the morning, the paper was pretty solid. A little moist in the crevices, but let's not hold that against him. Definitely dry enough for the next stage, and that's going to be a layer of papier-mâché clay.
So similar to the last stage, but rather than just using torn up paper shreds and laying them on, we're going to make some clay. If you want to do this, it's a pretty simple process. Soak some newspaper in water, pulp it up using a stick blender. This one's seen better days anyway. Then once it's pulped up good, squeeze out the water by dumping the pulp into a dishcloth, fold up the edges so the pulp doesn't escape, and just twist until it stops dripping. We used hot water for this, maybe too hot. Hot. And here we go. Paper pulp, ready to add to the mix. We're also going to mix in some Das air dry clay too, cut into small chunks for easier kneading and mixing, and then things are about to get messy. So Hattie did a quick transformation from casual goth chic to Sector 7G safety inspector, and we were ready to mix. First, flake up the paper pulp, add clay to taste, then a good squidge of PVA glue, some more filler, and people asked what this was in the last video, it's just mix it yourself polyfiller, nothing special. And now, if you have young children, go render them down into some high quality oil. And if you don't have kids, don't worry, you can go out and buy something like this baby oil. It'll work just the same way. A little squirt of this will help to emulsify everything, and the result should be a bit smoother and reduce the risk of cracks as it dries. And now, mix until it looks like the world's most forsaken tuna mayo, adding a little water if it's too dry. And once it's like a smooth workable paste that keeps its shape and doesn't sag because it's too wet, it's time to slap it on.
We basically just covered every section that we wanted to build up with skin. This isn't adding detail at this point, just getting the body shapes more in line with concept art, and essentially adding strength to the sections that are currently just made of foil and hard paper. Nice! Look at this boy! He's really starting to take shape now. And what a shape! Woof.
Now I'll pop this up on the display cabinet to dry, out of the way of accidental bumps and the sneaky grabby hands of my kids, and now let's talk about weapons. We already made great progress in the previous episode with a giant gnarly sword made out of XPS foam and a big nasty stick we found while walking the dog, but we haven't really got anything for the other hand. Until last week, that is. I've been keeping an eye on eBay for cheap dinner bells, and I managed to snag a doozy for £6.50. It's a real bell, probably with a cute history, but I'm not going to be precious about it. This isn't a sacred keepsake, someone flogged it for the same price as a Big Mac meal, so it's going to get smashed up, customised, and Nurglified. The only problem is, once you start messing around with bells, taking bits out or adding sculpting materials, they really quickly lose their resonance. So while it's still intact and sounding pristine, I recorded its peal using two mics at the same time. The same mic as we record these voiceovers with, and also a Shure Beta 87A, which has a brighter, but not overly harsh top end, perfect to capture its zingy tone. I also recorded it at a way higher sample rate than required, so I can pitch it down to give it the equivalent sound of a bell at that scale in our world, which would be about 4 meters tall, 5 meters wide. But I'd have to get out my old acoustics textbooks to figure that one out, but yeah, big and loud, obviously. Anyway, now we've got that sound immortalized, it's time to cut this thing up. I used a rotary tool with a rounded sanding end to grind away chunks and divots from the face of the bell, and then switched to a cutting tool to slice away some broken and damaged bits. Ultimately, it would be cool if this looked really horrible and corroded.
Once Guy had beaten it up a bit, I sketched out a quick idea of how to make the bell look more Nurgly, and then started cutting up some cheap Halloween decorations for the big triple skull motif, and then lots of Citadel human skulls in half to make the big ring of skulls across the top. All stuck to the surface of the bell using Milliput to make it look like it's cast into the metal, not just stuck on with glue. We're obviously going to add lots of dirt and corrosion to this, but that'll be later on when we get to painting.
In terms of how to attach the bell to the model's left hand, we've got a few options. We can obviously reattach it to the original handle and style it to be a bit more Nurgly, or maybe keep it in the same gnarly plague tree aesthetic as the sword, or maybe have it swinging from a short length of chain. I bought this chain a few years ago to see if it would stop Nessa's silly lead chomping when she sees cats when we're out for walks, but it didn't, and I don't want her to break her teeth, so I've got this that I could use. Break it up, make it shorter maybe? What do you think? I'm going to be asking the channel's supporters on Patreon what they think would be the best, and we'll make it happen in a future episode. Now speaking of which, suitably Titanic thanks to our latest sign-ups on Patreon. Ginger Malice, Johannes Bengtsson, Blood Medusa, Angry Orc, Luca Novascone, Stephen Dunscombe, Moat, Dave, Michael Wissinger, Ethan Moss, Crimson, Cookie Kraken, and Callum McEwen. You guys and girls literally keep us going, paying the bills, putting food on the table, and we honestly can't thank you enough.
A final touch for this video though was to use pretty much a whole bottle of this Winsor & Newton black lava texture gel to add some quick, dirty earth texture onto the base surrounding the model.
And then once that was all dry, we painted the whole thing in gesso, which, if you're unfamiliar, is a kind of liquid plaster that artists use to prime their canvases and murals. It protects surfaces, takes paint and sculpting materials really well, and because we added a bit of ink into that gesso, it'll make it easier to film as there won't be big glaring white foam all over the place for future videos. We also primed the bell with some metal primer so our dirt and grime effects will have something to stick to next time. Now the basic shape has been refined, we can start using higher quality sculpting materials like more air dry clay for the crude elements like hands and feet, or milliput for finer, more fiddly areas, and start making things look like an actual gigantic in-universe monster with loads of small fun details that reward close inspection.
We hope you liked this video and tune in for the next one. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss them.
Oh, also, just a quick one, we got loads and loads of comments in the last video asking if there was a track on the secret CD that was hiding inside the Lazy Susan we took apart to use for the base of this massive model. Well, I've got a background in music production, and I've got a pretty broad musical knowledge, and although it's pretty obscure, I think I found the exact track. It took a while, but I found it, and I've linked it in the video description in case you want to listen. I think it's pretty good. And that's it! Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Bye for now.
Bye bye.